Ahoy hoy, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to discuss the time I was in a tornado, which was this past July. So on July 5th, the day after 4th of July, a EF1 tornado hit Bowie, Maryland. It hit somewhere else close to Chesapeake Beach, but I forgot where. I want to say Deal, but I'm not sure. But I'm going to talk about the one that hit Bowie because I was there when it happened. So, if you're wondering, Maryland is not typically a hotspot for tornadoes, but we can get them. We have gotten hit by severe tornadoes before, the state, not Bowie as far as I know. The deadliest tornado Maryland has ever gotten was the Plata in 1925, which was an EF5. And then in 2002, I think it was March, so about 10 years ago, an EF4 hit. And the two paths from the 1925 and the 2002, kind of cross paths and stuff. And also, we had a tornado 2 weeks after 9/11 in 2001 when it hit College Park and parts of Beltsville, and that was an EF3. So yeah, Maryland can get hit, and actually, as I was looking up to double check what the EF rating was for Bowie on the 5th of July, I learned that Maryland had another tornado, this time in Smith Island, where it was hit by an EF1 because it started off as being a waterspout and then it became a tornado when it came on land and it did some damage. So that was classified as an EF1 too. But yeah, we get tornadoes, but we don't get tornadoes as often as the states do in Tornado Alley. So I would like to talk about the tornado, and then I'll get into the technicalities later, since I studied tornadoes for the fun of it and have been since I was 14. So when it hit on that day, it was a Tuesday, and my dad was making dinner, and then I don't remember what we were doing before we got the warning. I know we had just come home from Annapolis about 2 hours before, and that's another thing. There was a tornado that hit Annapolis last year. And that was also an EF1 or EF2, I can't remember, but it was lower than an EF3. So we had just gotten home from Annapolis 2 hours before, because we went to Chuck E. Cheese with the kids. And I think we were just milling about. My dad was making dinner, or in the process of making dinner. And then my mom and I both got alerts on our phones that we needed to get to shelter because there was a tornado warning. And this thing did sneak up on us, seriously, because there isn't really any major storms. I mean, there was thunderclouds, but you didn't think it was going to be a severe thunderstorm. And I think it formed a bit outside of Bowie, if I remember correctly. But my mom and my kids went to the downstairs bathroom since there's no windows, because in a tornado, they recommend that if you don't have a storm shelter, which most places in Maryland do not, and if you don't have a basement, which we don't, find a room on the first floor of your house that has no windows and use that as shelter. So, like I said, for us, or for my parents, it's the downstairs bathroom. So we put some pillows in there and had a radio, had a candle in there. Dad took out the paintings because he knew that if something happened and the paintings come out, that could do damage. Because the biggest thing that gets people killed and injured in tornadoes is not the actual funnel cloud. It is the debris it picks up, because it can turn anything into a missile, and it can kill you or hurt you really badly. And so he did that. And Daddy and I didn't go to the shelter. We looked around to see where the tornado was coming from, to see which direction it was coming from. Now, luckily for us, my parents live on a hill. So a tornado wouldn't be able to come easily at them from, say, this side, pointing towards myself, this side, and even this side because there's a hill going down. And then on this side, it's flat for the most part on 197 until you get to like Rockledge mostly, where it starts to become hilly towards Bowie State. So in order for a tornado to be a real threat to my parents, it would have to form somewhere after Rockledge Elementary School and stuff, heading towards that way in 197. And even in some parts of 197, it could still be a threat, like after it goes past Fox Hill and it goes up this way. If the tornado would form like on the low part, that could be a threat as well. But the thing is that tornadoes have a hard time keeping their shape on hills because they need flat surfaces to really get going. And if you live on a hill or a mountain or whatnot and you don't have any flat land, a tornado is going to have a hard time keeping its shape, let alone keeping its power while it does its damage. That's why most tornadoes in the United States happen in the Midwest, because the Midwest is flat terrain, so a tornado can easily go on it, keep going and stuff without any obstacles for the most part. So yeah, I mean, there's some parts of Maryland that are flat. La Plata is one of them. But Bowie is very hilly, so even if a tornado did touch down, like it did in July, it's not going to be able to keep shape for a very long time. In fact, the most it did damage was probably a mile. And, let's see, it formed near Harris Teeter, which is where Marketplace used to be. And we used to have a mall there called Marketplace, which got torn down because, yeah. And that is near the intersection of 450 and Superior Lane. And they say EF1 damage. And they did say the Harris Teeter got damaged. But when we went by there the next day, we didn't see any damage. So that makes me think that the damage was either on the roof or it was on the other side where we couldn't see it. And also we didn't see much trees down, but I think most of the trees that came down were like in the M section of Bowie. We live in the F section. So we live right near 197 and stuff, if you want a visual, especially if you're from Bowie or Maryland. So while I knew that we were kind of in a safe place because, like, my parents live in a very hilly area, and I know tornadoes don't do well on hills, I was still looking outside the windows, seeing where it could be coming from. There were times that it got windy, and I thought, okay, maybe it's time to get in, but then it was very brief, like it was a gust. And I'm trying to remember which way the gust was going to. I don't remember if it was going towards this way or that way. But keep in mind, when you have a tornado, they always form in the southwest part of the storm. They never form basically in the north. They never basically develop in the east. It always goes, a tornado always typically goes from either south to north or east to west. It's never much in the northern and western regions. So both my father and I were looking out for where the tornado could be coming from. Not to mention, I had wanted to storm chase once upon a time, especially after when Twister came out in 1997, I think, somewhere in the late 90s. And not to mention, of course, I've been studying natural disasters for the fun of it since I was 14 years old, and tornadoes is the disaster I like to study the most. So you can imagine I was pretty pumped when this happened. On the other hand, my kids were terrified. They were crying. They wanted to call their father, and my significant other was in Sweden at that time. Problem is, when the storm hit, it was like after midnight. So it was in the middle of the night for him, and he was sleeping, and he needed to sleep since he gets up early in the morning to go to work. So they couldn't call him, which I felt really bad about. And it didn't help him either that I was, like, pumped up about the tornado. I had an adrenaline rush. So rather than comforting my children, I was going, oh, where is the tornado coming from? You know, doing that. I know that's not a good thing to do. But, yeah. My mom felt bad, too, because she thought she was panicking a lot to the point where the kids were picking up on it, and therefore were afraid because she was. She wasn't necessarily afraid, and she wasn't going, oh, please come here. She was panicked a little bit, and she thinks that's what the kids were feeling. But she got that way, not because of the impending tornado, but because the Weather Channel we were watching was very, well, I mean, I could tell he was excited, but there was a little bit of panic in his voice too. And here's my opinion. Do not ever watch the news, because especially if you're in an area that's not used to tornadoes, you're going to get someone who's going to sound like they're being panicked, and they might inflame your own panic and stuff. It's never wise to panic in something like that. You got to keep a clear head. You got to stay calm, and, you know, just look outside, see what you see. There's telltale signs that a tornado is coming. One is if the sky is green, like green bluish. Also, if you get a lot of hail, if you get hail, that's another indication. It was 2014. So about 8 years ago, when I was still pregnant with my daughter and my son was a toddler, he was 1, I think, by this point. We had a storm in Sweden, where I used to live in Sweden. And, you know, Sweden can get tornadoes too, but I don't think they've ever gotten a strong one like we've had in Maryland, but they get EF1s as well. And I noticed that the sky looked greenish, and not to mention we had hail, and it was windy. Using those signs, I kind of concluded there was a tornado somewhere coming. And no, we don't really have much of a tornado warning system in Sweden, because we rarely get hit by Sweden. Sweden is a little bit like how it is in Maryland, where you have a lot of hilly terrain as well. But also, they don't get tornadoes as much either, even compared to Maryland, because they just don't have the certain ingredients to produce a lot of tornadoes. You usually need cool, dry air and warm, moist air. And tornadoes feed off of moisture. It's a little bit similar to how hurricanes operate, too. Hurricanes need that moisture as well to grow. But Sweden doesn't have a lot of moisture, even though we have a lot of lakes, and we have, like, we're like basically a peninsula towards the south. I think it's towards the south. But, you know, we're surrounded in water on some sides of Sweden, and there's a lot of lakes. We don't make enough moisture for it to be Tornado Alley Europe. A European version of Tornado Alley, because there's not enough moisture there. It doesn't get too hot or too humid here. I mean, it can, but not to the extent that it does in Maryland, or let alone the Midwest in the U.S. So, back in 2014, and again, like it is in Maryland, most houses here are not really equipped with, you know, a storm shelter. And we had a basement, but we had windows, both in the bathroom in the basement and in the actual basement. We could hide near the stairwell, but the thing is, if the door's not strong enough, it could get ripped off, and then you're screwed. So you never want to be anywhere near a window, because when a tornado hits, that window is going to implode and the glass is going to be thrown at you. So that's why you never need to be near a window, because it is like a bomb going off when a tornado hits and it's near a window. So you always need to be near. That's why they recommend being in a windowless area on the first floor of your house. So, since we didn't have a basement that was windowless, and most rooms basically had windows. The thing that I improvised was in the kitchen, so I closed the windows and leading to the foyer, to the bedroom, and to the foyer this way. It's a really weird layout. And I hid behind the refrigerator because the refrigerator had a wall next to it. And I sat there with my son and my dog and waited and waited and waited. And when it stopped hailing and being very windy, we came out, and there was a lot of hail in the yard. And, nothing looked out of place until I took my dog for a walk a few days later, and there were trees down in the forest. And they looked like EF1 damage. So, not far from my house, an EF1 tornado formed. I didn't hear it, but I saw the damage of it. So, I say that because I knew what the signs were of a tornado, even without getting a warning. I knew what the signs are because I studied tornadoes that much. So, that day in Bowie, there was no green sky that I saw. I did notice it looked a little bit too yellowish, and you could see the clouds up swirling a lot. Not like rotating like you would get with an actual funnel cloud, but there was a lot of swirling going around. And when you see a lot of swirling, you could tell that the atmosphere is very unstable, which is why tornadoes get produced, or severe storms get produced. So I go up and down the stairs, looking at the windows, trying to see where exactly the tornado would be coming from, which is easier said than done, given, like I said, you don't have much clear sight on the horizon, given where we live. There were trees and houses in the way. However, as you saw, if you saw the video, I will have the video linked at the end of this video so you can see it for yourself. Like, it will be embedded at the end of this video. 18-20 seconds into that video, pay attention to this clear area that's between two trees. And, you can see my parents' car right here. And it's above the house that's in front of us in that clear area. Now, initially, before that, I thought I saw some rotation like this, but I wasn't sure because I couldn't see anything like at cloud level. And then I go this way, I pan towards that way, then I go back this way, and when I pan back, which is at the 18th second mark, maybe 20-second mark, it's between 18 and 20 seconds, you start to see some rotation in this little cloud, like a little funnel and stuff. And I'm like, I think I caught it. What I didn't know then, and I didn't mention this on that video, was that, and this is after I got back to Sweden and I looked it over with my son because he was showing his friends it. When I pan that way, you see a tree, and then you see a big tree close to the camera. And then you see this big, huge cloud right there. I had no idea I had filmed the whole entire funnel cloud. I thought, and what I thought I saw with rotation in that clear area was actually the end of it. So, yeah. After that happened, I went to the bathroom and calmed my kids down. And then when it began to get sunny, it was no longer windy and, hail and stuff, the kids and my mom came out of the bathroom. And we watched the news. We heard that Harris Teeter got damaged. We heard that some people had trees fall down. I know one person had at least their tree go in the house. And, either fall in their yard. So, that was my experience being in my first and only tornado so far. I thought it had been an EF0 though, because I didn't see much of the damage the day after, but the city of Bowie was pretty quick in cleaning up the damage and stuff, so that's probably why. And by the time we saw the damage, it was already in the late morning. So it was like 12, 14 hours later, after the tornado came, that they had plenty of time to clean up. And they cleaned up quick. So, to give you guys a basic idea of how the Fujita scale works, or what the Fujita scale is, although they call it the enhanced Fujita scale now. It was upgraded in 2007 in the US, and then it was upgraded in 2013 in Canada. But the original Fujita scale was introduced in 1971, ironically the same year that my significant other was born. And the difference between the original Fujita scale and the enhanced Fujita scale is that the quality of construction is taken into account for the damage, as well as standardizes different kinds of structures. And the wind speeds on the original scale were considered to be too high from meteorologists and engineers. So it's a little bit different between the two scales. There's no longer an EF6. There's no longer an EF6 tornado. Experts thought that was too high to really get, because even if you get high wind speeds, the damage would look identical to that of an EF5. For example, there's been like 2 tornadoes that I know of that were considered to be like an EF6 or an F6, since EF6 doesn't exist. One was the Xenia, Ohio tornado during the 1974 outbreak. And then the other, which was probably closer to an F6 rating than the Xenia tornado, was the one that happened in Moore back in 1999, since that has the fastest recordings of wind speeds, as it was recorded over 300 miles per hour or 304 miles per hour. It has the fastest wind speeds recorded on Earth. The tornado that hit Moore back in 1999. There was one that hit in 2013, but the wind wasn't as high. The difference between that one and the one that hit in 2009 was that, or not 2009, 1999. The one that hit in 1999 had a smaller funnel. It was like, and did less damage. Or not less damage, but its damage path was less. It was like it was like a mile, where the other one was 2 miles or something like that. Or the funnel was 2 miles, something like that. But, like I said, it wasn't considered an F6 because the damage looked identical to F5. And so, right now, wind speeds for an EF5 would be 200 miles per hour or 322 kilometers per hour. And back when you had the original one, it was a lot faster. It was, I think, 200 something. I forgot what it was, but it was a lot higher than what it is now. But yeah, and keep in mind with the Fujita scale, or the enhanced Fujita scale, they measure the tornado by damage, how much it damages. The one thing that hurricanes and tornadoes have in common also is they're measured by damage. The difference is tornadoes are measured by their damage after the fact, while hurricanes are measured before it happens. So yeah, if you like this video, smash the like button. If you subscribe, I'll be absolutely delighted, and I'll see you guys later. Toodles!